Chapter 3. Scar House. As the sun began to set and the guests settled into their luxurious quarters, Morna took a moment to herself. She quickly slipped out of her elaborate dress and into her riding attire, eager to escape the confines of the grand house. With expert knowledge of the layout, she carefully sneaked out of her bedroom and made her way through hidden passageways and secret corridors, avoiding any chance encounters with prying eyes, but mostly to avoid her Uncle Thorkel. The servants were well aware of Morna's penchant for escaping, and they turned a blind eye as she passed by, knowing better than to question her mischief. She darted across the courtyard, her heart racing with excitement as she reached the stables. The familiar scent of hay and horses enveloped her as she burst through the heavy wooden doors with unbridled enthusiasm. As Morna skipped towards Raske's stall, her favourite horse who never failed to brighten her day, she was greeted with an unexpected void. The usual sounds of neighing and rustling straw were absent, replaced only by an eerie silence that sent panic fluttering in her chest. She searched frantically for any sign of her beloved companion, her heart racing with fear. Her calls for John, the head stable lad, rang out through the empty stables. He appeared immediately, sensing the urgency in Lady Morna's voice. "Where is Raske?" she asked, trying to sound assertive but feeling a tremor of worry creeping into her voice. "I am not sure, my lady," he replied with concern etched on his face. "I personally secured him in his stall only a short time ago and went for my dinner." His thoughts jumped to what Lady Morna's retribution might be towards him if something had happened to her prized horse. Lady Morna's brows furrowed in deep concern as she surveyed the empty stall where Raske should have been. She knew in her gut that something was terribly wrong. "Quickly, gather the stable hands," she commanded John, her voice firm and urgent. "We must search every corner of the estate. He couldn't have gone far." Without hesitation, she grabbed Alvis' saddle and bridle from the rack and tacked him up. She led him out of the byre into the yard and quickly mounted him from the large mounting stone in the centre of the cobbled yard. Without waiting for John to gather the stable hands, Lady Morna kicked her heels into Alvis's side, urging him to dash off into the setting sunset. The horse responded eagerly, his powerful muscles propelling them forward with a thundering gallop. Lady Morna clung to the reins as they raced through the grounds of the estate, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Morna and Alvis searched tirelessly through all the familiar places they knew Raske frequented, but he was nowhere to be found. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the countryside as they continued their search. With each passing moment, Alvis and Morna's anxiety grew, their minds racing with thoughts of Raske's possible whereabouts. Had something happened to him? Or had he simply disappeared without a trace? Morna and Alvis were left with a sense of dread and uncertainty about their friend's mysterious disappearance. As the night grew darker, Lady Morna's resolve only strengthened. She knew she couldn't rest until Raske was found, safe and sound. Guiding Alvis through the familiar trails of the estate, her mind raced with possibilities and worries. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Raske, not just as a prized horse, but as a dear companion who had been by her side through thick and thin. Suddenly, Alvis came to an abrupt halt, his ears pricked forward as if listening intently to a distant sound. Lady Morna's heart leaped in hope as she strained her own ears, trying to catch any sign of movement or life. And then, in the distance, she heard it, a faint whinny that seemed to be carried by the wind. Without hesitation, Lady Morna urged Alvis onwards in the direction of the sound. The last of the sunlight bathed the landscape in an ethereal glow, casting long shadows that seemed to dance around them as they dashed through its rays. The whinny grew louder and more distinct, guiding them towards a dense thicket at the edge of the estate. As they approached, Morna's heart pounded in anticipation, her breath coming out in short gasps. With fierce determination, Lady Morna and Alvis pushed their way through the dense foliage until they emerged into a small clearing. The sun now disappeared behind the horizon, casting a soft glow over everything in sight. In the centre of the clearing stood Raske, his coat glistening like gold in the dusk. But there was another figure with him, cloaked in shadow and emanating an unsettling aura. Morna felt a surge of panic in her gut as she approached, her eyes straining to make out the features of this mysterious presence. Lady Morna's heart sank as she recognized the ominous figure standing before Raske. Raske stood tall and proud, his eyes locking with Lady Morna's in a silent plea for help. Despite the danger that loomed before them, Raske remained steadfast, his loyalty unwavering even in the face of such a sinister adversary. Without a moment's hesitation, Lady Morna dismounted from Alvis and approached the menacing figure, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Release my horse immediately," she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Raske is under my protection, and I will not allow you to harm him." Morna continued emphatically. Morna's heart dropped as she laid eyes on the man standing next to her beloved horse. She immediately recognized him as Sigurd the Fake Deacon, known for his treacherous ways and malicious intent. His grin stretched wider as he saw Lady Morna approaching, his eyes glinting with malevolence. "Ah, Lady Morna," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "What a delightful surprise to see you here, and what a spirited colt you have." His words oozed with insincerity, making Morna's blood boil with rage. Her emotions were in turmoil as she watched Sigurd standing next to Raske. Anger burned hot within her, but there was also a twinge of fear and confusion. "What are you doing with my horse?" she managed to scream, her voice betraying the internal battle raging within her. "I found him wandering around our encampment and was bringing him back to your home." Sigurd's words dripped with false concern, but Morna could sense the deception hanging heavy in the air around them. Suspicion crept into her mind as she studied Sigurd's sly expression. "You expect me to believe that you just happened upon Raske and decided to return him?" Her voice held an icy edge, her gaze unwavering as she confronted the enigmatic figure before her. Sigurd's grin widened, revealing a glint of malice in his eyes. "Believe what you will, dear lady, but you need to control this stallion of yours. He shouldn't be allowed to wander where he pleases. Grave danger may come to him, or he may vanish from you forever." Rage surged through Morna's veins at his manipulative words. The bond between her and Raske was unbreakable, forged through trust and companionship. She would do anything to protect him, even if it meant facing off against the deceitful Sigurd. With determination in her stride, she marched up to Raske and gently removed the head collar and rope from his head. Handing them over to Sigurd, she stared him down with fierce eyes. "Take this and leave before I call for my father's guards." Raske nuzzled her cheek affectionately, his warm breath brushing against her skin. A sense of relief and peace washed over Morna as she realized that her beloved horse was safe and unharmed. Sigurd raised an eyebrow and took the collar reluctantly, a hint of admiration in his voice. Very brave words for someone so young and alone out here at dusk. The orange glow of the setting sun cast shadows around them, adding an eerie atmosphere to the tense standoff between the two figures. She could sense an air of mystery surrounding his disappearance, but for now she was simply grateful to have him back by her side. As she stroked his mane and whispered words of comfort, Lady Morna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this incident than met the eye. With a gentle hand, Morna led Raske back towards Alvis, who stood patiently waiting for them. The trio left the malevolent Sigurd behind and made their way back through the estate, the tension in Morna's heart easing with each step closer to the safety of the stables. As they approached the familiar wooden doors, Lady Morna couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding lingering in the air. John and the stable hands were waiting anxiously as Lady Morna and Raske emerged from the darkness, their faces lit up with relief at the sight of Raske returning unscathed. "My lady, we were so worried," John exclaimed, his voice filled with genuine concern and relief. Morna smiled gratefully at John and the others, a weight lifting off her shoulders as she saw the genuine care in their eyes. "Thank you for your concern, Johnny. Raske is safe now," she said softly as she patted Raske's neck affectionately, feeling a surge of gratitude for her safe return with beloved Raske. As Raske nuzzled her hand, Morna's heart swelled with love for the noble creature who had become more than just a horse to her. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged through trials and challenges that only deepened their connection. "However, John, we must be vigilant. I caught Sigurd the Fake Deacon with his hands on Raske, and he cannot be trusted, and his presence near Raske raises concerns." Her words were laced with caution, underlining the sense of unease that lingered in the air. John nodded solemnly. "What should we do, my lady?" John replied. with thoughts of how to protect Raske from any potential threats. She knew that Sigurd's intentions were far from noble, and she couldn't risk putting Raske in harm's way again. "I will increase the security around the stables, and we all need to keep a close eye on Raske," Morna declared, her voice firm with determination. "We cannot let our guard down, especially now that we know of Sigurd's interest in him." John and the stable hands nodded in agreement, their expressions mirroring Morna's seriousness. They understood the gravity of the situation and were ready to do whatever it took to ensure Raske's safety. "Come on, Raske," Morna murmured softly, reaching out to stroke his mane. "Let's get you settled in before dinner." Raske followed Morna obediently into the byre, his hoofbeats muffled by the straw-covered floor. As she led him to his stall, he nuzzled her shoulder affectionately in silent apology for causing her worry. Morna's heart swelled with a mix of emotions as she watched Raske, her loyal companion, exhibit his remorse in such a tender gesture. She knew that his curiosity often led him astray, but she couldn't help but forgive him every time he returned, his innocence and eagerness to explore always winning her over, thinking how similar to her own natures it was. As Raske settled into his stall, Morna took a moment to secure the latch and ensure he was comfortable. She stood beside him, her hand resting on his warm neck as they shared a quiet moment of understanding. The sounds of the evening began to filter in through the open windows of the byre, the distant hum of voices from the house, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the soft nickers of other horses settling down for the night. Once inside the familiar confines of the byre, Raske settled into his stall with a contented sigh, the scent of hay and straw enveloping him in comfort. Morna busied herself with brushing Raske down with his brush, checking his water and feed, ensuring he had everything he needed for the night ahead. The soft sounds of the other horses' movements filled the air, creating a soothing backdrop to their evening routine. With a final pat on Raske's neck, Morna turned to leave, but something made her pause. She glanced back at Raske, who was looking at her with those large, expressive eyes that seemed to hold a depth of emotion beyond his years. It was as if he had something more to say, something important that tugged at her heart. "What is it, Raske?" Morna whispered softly, as if she could coax out his unspoken thoughts. She moved closer to him, feeling a sense of vulnerability emanating from the colt. Raske lowered his head slightly, his breath warm against Morna's cheek as he leaned into her touch. In that moment, a wave of emotion seemed to pass between them, a silent exchange of understanding and unspoken words. As Morna stood there, enveloped in this intimate connection with Raske, she felt a surge of something stirring deep within her. It was as if a hidden part of herself was awakening, responding to the bond she shared with the young colt. She had always known there was something special about Raske, something that went beyond mere companionship. With a sudden clarity that took her by surprise, Morna realized that Raske wasn't just a horse to her, he was a kindred spirit, a mirror to her own soul. In his inquisitive eyes and gentle demeanor, she saw reflections of her own curiosity and longing for freedom. A sense of purpose welled up inside Morna, strong and unyielding. She felt a newfound determination taking root within her, fueled by the realization of the profound connection she shared with Raske. It was as though the threads of fate had woven them together, binding their destinies in ways she could no longer ignore. As Raske gazed at Morna with a mixture of trust and understanding, a silent pact seemed to form between them. It was an unspoken agreement that transcended words, a promise to embark on a journey that would reshape their lives in ways they had yet to comprehend. Morna's heart swelled with a sense of purpose as she met Raske's unwavering gaze. In that moment, she knew that their bond was not merely chance or circumstance. It was destiny calling out to them, beckoning them towards a shared path that would test their resolve and illuminate their true selves. With a newfound sense of clarity and determination, Morna made a silent vow to honor the connection she shared with Raske, to embrace the calling that seemed to echo through their very beings. As she looked into Raske's deep, soulful eyes, she felt a surge of courage coursing through her veins. It was as if his silent acceptance of their intertwined fates fueled her own resolve to embark on the journey that lay ahead. Without uttering a single word, Morna and Raske understood each other perfectly. They were bound by more than just duty. They were bound by a shared destiny that beckoned them to explore the depths of their souls and uncover truths that had long been hidden. With a determined gleam in her eyes, Morna vowed silently to stand by Raske's side through whatever trials may come their way. She knew that their journey would not be easy, but she also knew that together they were stronger than any challenge they could face. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, casting the world into twilight, Morna whispered softly to Raske, "We are ready for whatever lies ahead, my dear companion. Together, we shall unravel the mysteries that await us and forge a path that is uniquely ours." Raske seemed to nod in understanding, a quiet strength emanating from his form as he stood tall in the dimly lit byre. With a shared sense of purpose lingering in the air, Morna stepped back from Raske's stall, her heart brimming with determination and a newfound sense of clarity. She knew that their journey would be fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but she also believed in their bond and the resilience it would bring. As she turned to leave the byre, a sudden commotion outside caught her attention. The faint sound of hurried footsteps and raised voices drifted through the open window, stirring an uneasy feeling within her. Instinctively, Morna's hand went to the hilt of the dagger she always carried at her waist, readying herself for whatever may come their way. Raske sensed her tension and moved closer to her side, his muscles tense with readiness. The quiet rustling of hay and the distant sounds of the night seemed to amplify, creating an atmosphere charged with anticipation. Morna's grip tightened around the dagger, her eyes scanning the shadows beyond the byre's entrance. With a swift motion, she pushed the door slightly ajar, peering outside. Moonlight bathed the courtyard in a silvery glow, casting eerie shadows that danced with each flicker of the lanterns. In the distance, figures darted between buildings, their hushed conversations carried by the night breeze to Morna's straining ears. She furrowed her brow, trying to make out their identities in the dim light. Raske stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the movement outside, sensing her unease. A sudden realization dawned on Morna. These were not ordinary visitors or members of their household. The air was thick with tension as she realized they were intruders, their intentions unknown but undoubtedly menacing. Morna's heart raced as she assessed the situation unfolding before her. The gravity of the moment was not lost on Raske, who stood alert and ready by her side. Without a word, they shared a silent understanding. They were in this together, prepared to face whatever threat approached. As the figures drew nearer, Morna could make out their dark cloaks billowing behind them in the night breeze. Their hurried movements and whispered exchanges sent chills down her spine, confirming her suspicions that they meant trouble. With a deep breath to steady herself, Morna knew she had to act swiftly. She whispered a command to Raske, who obediently backed up against the stall door, ready to defend if needed. Gripping the dagger tightly in her hand, Morna stepped out into the courtyard, her eyes cold and determined. The intruders froze momentarily at the sight of Morna standing there, a solitary figure bathed in moonlight with steely resolve etched on her face. Her voice cut through the stillness of the night like a blade, sharp and commanding. "Identify yourselves and state your purpose here," Morna demanded, her tone unwavering despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The figures hesitated for a moment, exchanging furtive glances amongst themselves, before one stepped forward, his features obscured by the shadows. "We mean no harm, Lady Morna. We seek counsel with your uncle. We fear his life could be in danger." He spoke, his voice laced with urgency. Morna studied the stranger carefully, her grip on the dagger relaxing slightly but not entirely. "Explain why you approach under the shroud of darkness, uninvited and veiled in secrecy," she pressed, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the sincerity in his words. The man shifted uneasily, his gaze darting between Morna and Raske, who stood poised to defend if necessary. "We have come from Westray. I'm Sigurd of Westness, and this is my son Brynjolf." Sigurd of Westness and his son Brynjolf stood before Lady Morna, their faces etched with concern and urgency. Lady Morna studied them intently, weighing their words against the tension in the air. Raske, sensing the gravity of the situation, kept a watchful eye on the newcomers, ready to act if needed. Morna's voice was firm, yet tinged with a hint of caution as she spoke again. "What peril threatens my uncle, and why do you come seeking him under the cloak of night? Speak quickly and truthfully, for I sense there is more to this tale than meets the eye." Sigurd took a step forward, his expression grave. Lady Morna, your uncle has been marked as a target by dark forces that seek to undermine his authority. We bring news of a treacherous plot that could endanger his life and the stability of these lands. Brynjolf nodded in agreement, his young face set in determination. Lady Morna's eyes narrowed as she listened intently to Sigurd's words. The weight of his revelation hung heavy in the night air, swirling with uncertainty and danger. Her mind raced, considering the implications of this treacherous plot and the potential consequences it held for her uncle and their home. Without breaking eye contact, Lady Morna made a swift decision. "You shall accompany me to my uncle's chambers," she declared, her voice resonating with authority. "If what you speak is true, then time is of the essence." Turning to Raske, she gave a nod, silently conveying she was safe with Sigurd and Brynjolf and would have to leave with them to the house. Raske whinnied softly, a mix of concern and trust in his eyes, as Lady Morna signalled for him to stay. He pawed the ground, his hooves restless, but he knew he had to trust her judgment. With one last reassuring look towards Raske, Lady Morna led the way, with Sigurd and Brynjolf following closely behind. The night seemed to close in around them as they made their way through the darkened corridors of the house. Shadows flickered and danced along the stone walls, adding an eerie quality to their hurried steps. Lady Morna's grip on the dagger remained firm, a silent reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond their sight. As they reached the entrance to her uncle's chambers, Lady Morna paused for a moment, steeling herself for what awaited inside. With a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy door, revealing a room bathed in candlelight, with her uncle seated at his desk, engrossed in a collection of ancient texts and maps spread out before him. The flickering candles cast a warm glow on his weathered face, lined with years of wisdom and experience. He looked up in surprise at the unexpected visitors, his eyes narrowing in suspicion before recognizing Lady Morna. "Uncle," Morna began, her voice steady yet urgent, "these are Sigurd of Westness and his son Brynjolf. They bring grave news of a treacherous plot against you." Thorkel's wrinkled face contorted with fear as he studied the two men standing before him. He took a step back, then gestured for them to come closer. Sigurd removed his hood, revealing his scarred and weathered features, and Thorkel's eyes widened in recognition. "My old friend Sigurd," he exclaimed, embracing him tightly. Brynjolf followed suit, removing his hood to reveal his youthful face, and Thorkel greeted him warmly as well. "What brings you to my shores at this late hour?" Thorkel asked eagerly. Sigurd's expression turned grave once more as he recounted the details of the sinister plot that threatened Thorkel's rule and safety. His voice was low, filled with urgency, as he revealed the intricate web of betrayal and deceit that had been woven around the unsuspecting lord. Thorkel listened intently, his weathered brow furrowed in deep thought. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on his face, emphasizing the lines of wisdom and weariness etched into his features. As Sigurd spoke, a mix of emotions played across Thorkel's face: concern, disbelief, and a steely resolve to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Brynjolf stood by his father's side, his youthful eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and apprehension. He had seen the weight of responsibility settle upon his father's shoulders, and now understood the gravity of the situation they had stumbled upon. Lady Morna watched Thorkel closely, her own features a mask of determination and concern. She knew that his next actions would be crucial, not just for their household, but for the entire region under his rule. Thorkel finally spoke, his voice resonating with authority and conviction. "I am grateful for your warning, Sigurd. This treachery cannot go unpunished," he declared, his gaze steely and unwavering. Lady Morna stepped forward, her eyes meeting Thorkel's with unwavering support. "What is our course of action, uncle? How do we root out this danger before it strikes?" she inquired, her voice a steady beacon amidst the storm of uncertainty that threatened to engulf them. Thorkel's face was etched with a mix of concern and determination as he turned to Sigurd and Brynjolf. "I fear your warning may have come too late, my friends. As you are aware, Earl Harald and his entourage are already within my walls and occupy my lands." Brynjolf's jaw tightened in frustration. "Then we must move quickly and with purpose. We must gather our most loyal allies and rally our forces to stop his deceitful plans before he catches wind of our knowledge." Brynjolf continued grimly, his eyes blazing with determination. "We cannot afford to hesitate or falter. We must strike with all our might and put an end to his treachery once and for all." "We cannot and must not," Thorkel commanded, his voice carrying the weight of leadership honed through the years. "We must approach this with caution and cunning," Thorkel stated, his voice a low rumble that demanded attention. To confront Earl Harald head-on would be to play into his hands. We must outmaneuver him, anticipate his moves, and strike when he least expects it. Sigurd of Westness's weathered face twisted into a grimace as he nodded in agreement, his deep-set eyes reflecting the weight of countless years of experience, just like his friend Thorkel. "What do you suggest, Thorkel?" Sigurd's voice was stern and unrelenting, with every word carrying the weight of his hardened wisdom. Thorkel's gaze shifted between Lady Morna, Sigurd, and Brynjolf as he formulated a plan. "We will gather our most trusted allies and devise a strategy to expose Earl Harald's treachery without alerting him to our intentions. We must act swiftly but with precision," he explained, his mind already working through the intricate details of their next steps. Sigurd and Brynjolf stood at the ready, their faces set in grim determination as they prepared to follow Thorkel's lead. Lady Morna's eyes shone with a fierce determination as she stood by her uncle's side, ready to support him in whatever came their way. Thorkel's voice thundered with ironclad authority as he barked out orders. "Sigurd, Brynjolf, move swiftly and gather our most loyal allies. Warn them of the treachery that threatens our very existence. Meanwhile, I will play the role of a naive fool and entertain Harald and his entourage, planting seeds of doubt in their minds. But once they have departed from my isle, we will convene and unleash our plan to expose Harald's deceit before it takes root." Sigurd and Brynjolf bowed in acknowledgement to their assigned duties. Lady Morna turned to her uncle, her expression a blend of concern and resolve. "We stand with you, Uncle Thorkel. Together, we will navigate this treacherous path and emerge victorious." Thorkel placed a reassuring hand on Lady Morna's shoulder, his eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and determination. "Your support means more to me than you know, my dear Morna," he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "We face dark times ahead, but with the strength of our bond and the wisdom of our actions, we shall prevail." Thorkel continued. "Now, lead Sigurd and Brynjolf out of the house without being seen so they can carry out their tasks," he said, kissing his niece on her forehead, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "You have grown into a woman of great strength and courage, Morna. I have no doubt that you will play a crucial role in our upcoming endeavors." Thorkel turned his attention to both his loyal friend Sigurd and his son Brynjolf. Sigurd and Brynjolf exchanged a solemn nod with Thorkel, their resolve unwavering as they prepared to carry out their mission. With Lady Morna leading the way, they slipped out of the chambers like shadows in the night, their steps muffled by the thick carpets that lined the hallway. The urgency of their task hung heavy in the air, driving them forward with a sense of purpose that matched the gravity of the situation at hand. As they made their way through the dimly lit corridors of Thorkel's stronghold, Sigurd's mind raced with thoughts of strategy and loyalty. He knew that time was of the essence, and every moment counted in their race to thwart Earl Harald's nefarious plans. Brynjolf walked beside him, his young face set in determination as he mirrored his father's steely resolve. Lady Morna led them to a hidden alcove near the stables where they could speak freely without fear of eavesdroppers. Once there, Sigurd wasted no time in outlining the intricacies of their plan, his weathered face a mask of concentration as he spoke. "Our first priority is to secure our most loyal allies and ensure that they are prepared to act swiftly when the time comes," he began, his voice low but filled with urgency. Brynjolf nodded in agreement, his eyes glinting with determination as he absorbed each word. Lady Morna's sharp, calculating gaze swept over the two men standing before her. As they explained their mission and outlined their plan, she listened intently, her mind already working out the potential risks and outcomes. "We must proceed with caution and precision," she spoke, her voice calm but laced with gravity befitting the seriousness of their task. The pair nodded in understanding and determination. "Please take care on your journey back to your boat," Lady Morna advised as they prepared to depart. I must attend to preparations for tonight's dinner." "We appreciate your assistance, my lady," Sigurd replied respectfully, "and we will do our utmost to return safely to you." With a final nod of farewell, the father and son disappeared into the cloak of darkness, leaving Lady Morna alone with her thoughts and concerns for their safety. Morna darted across the cobbled courtyard, her footsteps echoing against the stone walls. She reached the back door of the kitchen and swung it open, the warm aroma of roasting meats and simmering stews hitting her nose. The kitchen staff were bustling about, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, their chatter drowned out by the clanging of pots and pans. Ignoring Mrs. Fubister's watchful eye, Morna snatched a handful of grapes from a nearby table and popped them in her mouth as she made her way through the busy kitchen. She couldn't resist trying a spoonful of each dish as she passed by, savouring the flavours. As she skipped up the steps into the scullery, Mrs. Fubister's voice rang out behind her. "You'll spoil that pretty figure if you keep eating like that, my dear." Morna turned around with a mischievous grin. "I wouldn't want to end up like you, Mrs. Fubister," she teased. The head cook playfully threw a ladle at her, purposely missing. "Away with you, cheeky girl," she laughed as Morna disappeared into the scullery. She sprinted up the grand stone staircase, her heart racing with every step. With a sense of urgency, she slammed the heavy wooden door to her bedroom shut behind her. She let out a sigh of relief, grateful that she had not run into any of their important guests from Megaland. The ornate decor of her room engulfed her in a feeling of luxury and opulence as she collapsed onto the plush velvet bedspread. Her heart still pounding, she closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing thoughts. Outside, the sounds of muffled chatter and tinkling glasses drifted up from the party below, but for now, in this peaceful haven, she could escape it all. In the tranquility of her chamber, Lady Morna's mind whirled with the weight of their impending mission. She knew the gravity of the situation at hand and the dangers that lurked in the shadows. With a determined glint in her eyes, she rose from the bed and walked over to the intricately carved oak chest nestled in the corner of her room. With a gentle touch, Lady Morna unlocked the intricately designed chest with a silver key hanging from around her neck. The key glinted in the dim light as she carefully lifted the heavy lid, revealing a collection of treasured items inside. A finely crafted dagger, passed down through generations, rested atop a bundle of dried herbs and an ancient scroll bearing mysterious runes. But most preciously to Morna's heart was the small pouch with its intricate embroidery that contained the Danestain that adorned Raske's neck and was given to her by the Finnwife the day Raske was born. Morna's fingers reverently brushed over each item, drawing strength and comfort from the legacy they represented. She cradled the dagger in her palm and gently wrapped it in a swath of soft cloth before tucking it back into its rightful place in the box. As she ran her fingertips over the intricate markings on the scroll, they seemed to glow faintly in response to her touch. Just as she was lost in thought, there came a sudden knock on her chamber door. With a quick motion, she locked the chest and secured the key once again around her neck. "Enter," Morna called out confidently, ready to face whatever awaited beyond the threshold. The door creaked open, revealing a young servant girl with wide eyes and a slight tremble in her step. "Oh, it's just you, Mary," Morna breathed a sigh of relief. "Yes, my lady. I called several times to see if you were ready for me to assist you getting ready for the dinner tonight. I was worried you had run off." Mary spoke softly, barely above a whisper. Her words brought a smile to Morna's lips and eased any lingering tension from her shoulders. "No need to worry, my dear. I am here and ready for your assistance." Mary nodded, her expression a mix of relief and eagerness to serve her mistress. Lady Morna's calm demeanour and composed presence always inspired confidence in those around her. As Mary bustled about, helping Morna prepare for the evening's dinner, the young servant couldn't help but steal curious glances at the mysterious chest tucked away in the corner. "I've laid out 2 dresses on your bed, my lady." Mary gestured to the 2 gowns. One was rustic red with fur around the collar and cuffs, whilst the other was emerald, green velvet with embroidered gold border around the edges. Morna pointed to the emerald green. Mary went to take the rejected dress away, as Morna sat on the stool in front of the dressing table, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. "Mary, come brush my hair first." With gentle hands, Mary carefully laid the dress back onto the bed and then turned her attention to Morna's long, dark brown hair. She swept it over her shoulders and picked up the brush from the dressing table, her fingers occasionally tugging at the knots in Morna's hair. Each time she encountered a knot, Morna would close her eyes in discomfort. As she combed through Morna's hair, Mary's mind was a whirlwind of questions. What secrets did the locked chest hold? Why did Lady Morna keep it hidden away? The air in the chamber seemed charged with unspoken tales, beckoning Mary to uncover their mysteries. Breaking the tense silence, Morna finally spoke. "I can't bring myself to attend this feast tonight. Why must these outsiders come to our secluded island? It isn't fair." Morna let out a sigh of frustration, her words heavy with resentment towards the sudden intrusion on their peaceful home. Mary carried on brushing Morna's hair without answering. The soft bristles of the brush glided through Morna's thick locks, sending ripples of satisfaction down her back. She closed her eyes and savoured the feeling as Mary worked her magic. "There you are, my lady," said Mary, as she finished with Morna's hair, smoothing out any stray strands with delicate fingers. "Now let's get you dressed." She beckoned Morna over to the wardrobe and pulled out a leather corset, adorned with intricate designs and laces. Morna breathed in deeply as Mary began to lace her up, the tightness of the garment almost taking her breath away. "This is torture," complained Morna, her voice muffled by the constriction of the corset. Whoever invented this should be run through. But despite her grumblings, Morna couldn't help but feel grateful for Mary's help. She knew that looking presentable was crucial at this feast, especially since it was in honour of their guest, Earl Harald. "Even if the feast is in honour of our guest, I just can't be bothered," protested Morna, a hint of stubbornness in her tone. But Mary simply smiled to herself and continued to tighten the corset thoroughly. It was not easy being a lady of noble birth, constantly surrounded by expectations and duties. Morna didn't say more, Morna thought to herself. Show no weakness. Never let them pity you. Bah! It was advice her uncle once gave her, and the words were ingrained in her mind now, whether she liked it or not. She couldn't explain these thoughts to her maid, who was much too young and innocent to understand the struggles of nobility. How awful it felt, knowing that she was being paraded like some cow at a fair for the benefit of Earl Harald and his family. Morna stared at her reflection in the mirror, watching her eyes swell with unshed tears. She forced herself to turn away, her mind drifting back to the upcoming feast. "I guess I'll wear the green one. Thank you, Mary." Mary picked up the gorgeous green gown from the bed and carefully arranged it on the floor for Morna to step into. At 14 years old, Mary was only a few years younger than Morna, but already showed signs of maturity beyond her age. Her huge grey eyes sparkled with intelligence and determination, and a small, upturned nose gave her a mischievous quality. With Mary's help, Morna slipped her arms through the stiff sleeves of the gown and let Mary tie the back with a green satin ribbon. "I shouldn't tell you this, my lady," said Mary in a hushed tone as she paused for a few breaths. "But I have heard Earl Harald can be quick with his temper, and it is advisable not to provoke him." "So, I have heard also," replied Morna with a knowing smirk. "How awful for the poor unfortunate soul that ends up with him." The thought of being betrothed to someone like Earl Harald sent shivers down Morna's spine. Mary finished tying the back and then went to the basin to change Morna's wash water. "I also hear he is looking for a bride." Morna scoffed at this information. "Well, I hope he isn't looking my way," she said dismissively, but deep down she knew that Earl Harald and his family were here for a reason, and it likely involved finding suitable matches for their son. Morna walked over to the window, looking down at the gates below. Soldiers huddled outside the perimeter wall, their bright banners fluttering in the wind. There were at least 30 or 40 of them. She could see their weapons glinting in the light of the fires by their tents. Morna couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at their presence. What was Earl Harald planning? And would she be caught in the middle of it all? Morna flinched at the sudden knock on the door. With a sense of unease, she watched as Mary opened it to reveal 2 of Harold's guards kneeling on one knee in deference. Their armour gleamed in the dim light of the room, their weapons at their sides. "Your lady," the tall, red-headed guard spoke with a respectful tone. "Earl Harald requests a private audience with you in his quarters." Morna's mind raced as she weighed her options. She could feel Mary watching her, those bright eyes searching for any signs of hesitation. But Morna knew she must remain strong and resolute in her response. Morna felt a twinge of fear at the thought of Harold's potential anger when he received this news. But Morna lifted her chin defiantly. "I said I am otherwise engaged." She paused before adding under her breath, "And I will not be swayed." The two guards exchanged uneasy glances before hastily retreating from the room. Once they were gone, Morna and Mary shared a moment of relieved laughter before continuing with their tasks. As they prepared to leave for the feast, Morna noticed something out of place in her reflection on the vanity mirror. Turning around, she saw that the hidden door leading to the secret tunnels was slightly open, and the tapestry that usually covered it was missing. Suddenly on high alert, Morna asked Mary if anyone had been in her room while she was away. When Mary shook her head and confirmed that it had just been the two of them, Morna's suspicions only grew. She dismissed Mary and went to investigate the open door. Feeling a damp draft coming through, Morna pushed the door closed, but her unease only intensified. Only a select few knew about the secret tunnels that led outside, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to enter her room unnoticed. As she made her way down to the feast, Morna couldn't help but wonder who would want to sneak into her room, and why. And as she looked over her shoulder at the closed door behind her, she couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that something wasn't quite right. Morna's footsteps echoed through the long hallway, lit by flickering candelabras with walls of intricately carved wooden oak panels, which were adorned with richly woven tapestries, each one a masterpiece depicting tales of historic events, mythical creatures, and breathtaking landscapes. It was as if the tapestries were windows into other worlds, drawing Morna in with their vivid colors and intricate details. At the end of the hallway, Morna pushed open two heavy oak doors and stepped into the grand hall. Candles and lanterns cast a warm glow throughout the room, their light reflecting off the polished marble floors. Two large open fires crackled at either side of the hall, sending dancing flames up to the wooden roof timbers and beams. The scent of burning wood filled the air, adding to the cozy atmosphere. Morna walked elegantly towards her uncle Thorkel, seated at the top of the grand dining table. Thorkel looked up from his goblet of mead as Morna approached, a small smile playing on his lips. His eyes, though tired from the burdens of rulership, sparkled with pride as he beheld his niece. "My dear Morna," Thorkel greeted her warmly, rising from his seat to offer her a chair beside him. "You look radiant this evening." Morna returned the smile, grateful for her uncle's kind words. She took the seat next to him, feeling the weight of the upcoming feast pressing down on her shoulders. As she glanced around the grand hall, she noticed the other nobles and guests taking their places at the long tables adorned with sumptuous feasting dishes. Thorkel leaned in closer to Morna, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across their faces, adding an air of secrecy to their conversation. "Did our comrades leave the house without incident?" Morna gave a slight nod in acknowledgement. "I also received a request earlier today from Earl Harald that he wished to speak with you privately regarding his intentions." Thorkel's tone held a hint of regret, as if he knew this may not be welcome news. However, he could not deny the importance and urgency of the matter at hand. Morna's heart sank at the news, her stomach tying itself into knots. She knew this moment was inevitable, but the reality of facing Earl Harald filled her with dread. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Morna met her uncle's gaze with a determined expression. "I am aware, uncle," she replied, her voice unwavering despite the turmoil within her, "but I have my reasons for delaying the meeting." "What?" Thorkel studied her for a moment, his wise eyes searching hers before nodding in understanding. "You are your mother's daughter, Morna," he said softly, a hint of melancholy in his tone. "Strong-willed and courageous, but be cautious, my dear. Earl Harald is not one to be trifled with." Morna felt a surge of pride at her uncle's comparison to her late mother, but she also knew the weight of his warning. Earl Harald's reputation preceded him, and she had heard enough tales of his ruthlessness to know that this evening could change the course of her life. As sounds of jovial conversation and clanking silverware filled the hall, Morna couldn't shake off the sense of impending danger looming over her. The memory of this morning's intense argument with Earl Harald and her uncle came flooding back to Morna. She could still feel the stifling tension between them as they stood at the top of the stairs, their voices growing louder in frustration. It was a moment that had left a lasting impression on her. "Uncle," she asked, "was that what caused the heated argument with Earl Harald this morning?" Thorkel nodded solemnly, his expression filled with sadness. Throughout the evening, she tried to maintain a composed facade, engaging in polite conversation with the other guests and dignitaries. However, her mind kept drifting back to Earl Harald's ominous request for a private audience. As the feast progressed, a hush fell over the great hall as Earl Harald entered with his entourage. His presence commanded attention, his icy blue eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. Morna felt a chill as their eyes briefly met before he took his place at the high table. Uncle Thorkel rose from his seat at the head of the table, raising his goblet to Earl Harald in a gesture of respect. The Earl merely nodded in acknowledgement before turning his gaze back to Morna. The intensity in his stare made her blood run cold, as if his gaze could pierce through her very soul. Earl Harald's lips curled into a subtle smirk, a silent message of the power he held over the room. Morna fought to maintain her composure, her fingers tightening around the delicate crystal goblet in her hand. She could feel the weight of his attention on her, a predator sizing up its prey, but she refused to show any sign of weakness, locking eyes with Earl Harald in a silent challenge. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Earl Harald finally broke the silence with a suave tone that sent shivers down Morna's spine. "Lady Morna, you are looking beautiful this evening, and I am honored to be in your company this evening," Harald remarked as he sat down in the empty chair next to Morna. Morna inclined her head in a polite nod, masking the turbulent emotions swirling beneath the surface. "Thank you, Earl Harald, and the pleasure is all mine," she replied evenly, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within her. "I must confess that I felt a little disappointed that you refused my invitation to come to my quarters for a private audience," Lady Morna replied with a courteous smile. "Forgive me, my lord, but I was late returning from seeing to my horses, and did not want to keep the guest of honor waiting for the feast on my account." Earl Harald's eyes gleamed with a knowing glint, his smirk widening as if he saw through her facade. "Ah, the horses," he mused, his voice smooth like honey, but laced with an underlying threat. "Such noble creatures, much like yourself, Lady Morna. But I must insist that we find a time for our private discussion very soon." "Nafro." Morna felt a bead of sweat forming on her brow at his words, her mind racing to find a way out of this precarious situation. She knew that delaying Earl Harald would only make him more suspicious, but she also couldn't afford to be alone with him, not when the tapestry to the secret tunnels had been disturbed. With a forced smile, Morna replied, "Of course, Earl Harald. I shall make arrangements for our meeting at the earliest convenience." She prayed that her words sounded sincere enough to appease him, all the while keeping a watchful eye on his reaction, wary of the danger he posed. The tension in the air was palpable as Earl Harald inclined his head in acknowledgement, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer before turning away to engage in conversation with his mother and aunt sitting next to him. Morna's heart raced as she tried to gather her thoughts, her mind racing with possibilities of how to navigate this treacherous situation. She knew that she had to act swiftly and decisively if she wanted to protect herself and her family from Earl Harald's cunning schemes. Harald turned back to Morna, his eyes lingering on her as he spoke. "That reminds me," he began, his voice low and smooth like honey. "Your uncle tells me that the fine black stallion that followed us to your house belongs to you. Surely he should be broken by now and made to work like the others." Morna's expression softened as she replied, "Oh no, my lord. Raske is a free spirit who comes and goes as he pleases." A small smile played on her lips, hinting at a deep fondness for the horse. "That, my dear," chimed in Countess Helga with a disapproving frown, "is a privilege even men do not have. Never mind animals." Harald noticed that Morna ignored his mother's comments and changed the mood by asking about the stone hanging around Raske's neck. Her face lit up as she eagerly shared the story of Raske's birth and the purpose of the stone. "It's a Dane stone," she explained, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "It protects him from the Trows." "Trows?" scoffed Countess Fracock gruffly. "Those were wiped out from these lands hundreds of years ago. And even if they did exist, why would they want to harm your animal?" Morna shrugged slightly. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "All I know is that they killed his mother the day he was born. A wise Finnwife told me it was not meant for her, but for what she carried inside." Countess Helga rolled her eyes and interjected, "What rubbish! You don't want to believe everything these Finn women tell you. Haven't you heard the stories? They were mermaids once who couldn't trap mortal men when they were young, so they were transformed into old hags and sent to marry Finn men. And then they were forced to earn silver for their husbands." Morna held her ground, her eyes shining with determination. "That may be," she replied calmly, "but I believe that Raske is a special horse with a destiny to fulfill." As Countess Helga opened her mouth to reply, the heavy wooden doors of the great hall burst open with a dramatic gust. The aroma of succulent roasted meats, savoury vegetables, and freshly baked bread filled the air, making mouths water and stomachs rumble in anticipation. Rapid footsteps sounded against the marble floor as servants rushed in, carrying trays laden with platters of food fit for a king. Glistening juices dripped from the meats, while steam rose from the fluffy loaves of bread. The colours and scents danced together in an enticing symphony. Thorkel leapt to his feet, his goblet held high in one hand as he boisterously greeted his esteemed guests. His deep voice echoed off the stone walls, filling the great hall with energy and excitement. "At last let us feast," he bellowed, his enthusiasm infectious. "You have had a long day of travel, so please enjoy our hospitality, eat and be merry." He raised his goblet towards his guests in a welcoming gesture. Harald and his mother exchanged looks of delight as they eagerly accepted Thorkel's invitation to dine and replenish their weary bodies. The table was set with fine silverware and golden plates adorned with intricate designs. Wine flowed freely, and laughter filled the air as they indulged in the delicious feast before them, grateful for the warmth and comfort of their host's home after a long journey.